In the coming days, powerful snowstorms and extreme cold are expected across many parts of the US. Recent model updates suggest an increased likelihood of heavy snowfall, especially in the southeast and Midwest regions. In today's video, the first video of 2020, which is so exciting, we're kicking off the new year by discussing two major topics. First, we'll cover a very severe cold air outbreak. Second, we'll talk about multiple potentially major winter storms, including the possibility of East Coast blizzards. There are two significant chances for such storms, though these predictions may fluctuate. As always, we'll go over every scenario, analyzing the models and presenting the raw data without holding anything back. We'll begin by looking at the 6-10-day temperature outlook from the National Weather Service. I've been sharing these because some viewers comment that other sources aren't discussing these predictions. That's exactly why I include them. For the period of January 7 to 11, about a week from today, we see a very cold pattern throughout the east, while a lot of warmth is centered over the west and even extends into Alaska. This pattern reflects what we call a positive PNA, Pacific North American pattern. When warm temperatures dominate western North America, especially pushing far north into Alaska, it forces cold Arctic air to spill further south. That's why we're seeing frigid air reaching deep into the Gulf of Mexico and even Florida. The strong positive PNA creates a stark contrast between the warmth in the west and the cold in the east. When we analyze precipitation, we notice something concerning for snowfall, especially in inland and northern regions. As the cold air masses expand, the jet stream is pushed further south. It dips through the plains, curves over the Gulf, and stays offshore along the east coast. This intense trough suppresses storms, leading to drier conditions in the central and northern areas. If the cold weren't so intense and the pattern were more moderate, we'd likely see above-average precipitation in those areas. However, because of the suppression, regions closer to the coast and farther south may experience unusually high chances of snowfall during this period. These areas are more likely to have overlapping cold air and precipitation, creating opportunities for winter weather events. Looking at the 8 to 14-day outlook for January 9 to 15, we see a similar setup. The west remains warm, with temperatures surging into Alaska, while the cold air in the east pushes even farther south. The jet stream's position reinforces dryness in the central and inland regions, while areas farther south continue to see above-average precipitation. This setup favors snowfall in the deep south and coastal areas, but limits opportunities for inland snow. That said, there's still potential for storms to pull up the coast, which could bring snow to areas further north. Model predictions have been inconsistent, with some indicating coastal storms and others showing suppression. We'll review multiple models today to explore different possibilities. As always, when we're looking 7 to 15 days ahead, there's room for significant changes. Despite this uncertainty, I'm optimistic about interesting snowfall events accompanying the cold air. In the shorter term, we're tracking a snowstorm expected to occur Sunday into Monday. This is within the 5-day range, so confidence is high. The main question is whether it will track northward through the mid-Atlantic, bringing snowfall to northern areas, or if it will shift further south, affecting the deep south instead. Across the nation, the upcoming storm is not moving up or down the coast, but instead traveling horizontally. This system has the potential to create a significant swath of snowfall, which could become major in certain areas. The 3-4 week outlook for January 11 to 24 has remained consistent. As we approach this time frame, especially closer to January 11th, confidence in a colder period increases. However, as we move further out into the forecast period, e.g. January 20th to 24, uncertainty grows. For the early January period, though, we are highly confident in very cold temperatures. Yesterday, the National Weather Service released its overall January outlook, which suggests a colder than average month. This pattern aligns with the ongoing positive PNA, which continues to push warmth into Alaska and cold air deep into the eastern United States. This setup impacts the jet stream, making storm tracks particularly interesting to monitor. Today, we'll examine two runs of the GFS model, the 12Zs and the 18Zs. While I typically use either the 0Z or 12Z runs, including the 18Z will provide a comparison of how predictions are evolving. This will help us observe any changes from run to run. Starting with Thursday, January 2nd, the forecast indicates a colder but drier day compared to the last 3 or 4 days. The positive PNA is evident, with warmth pushing northward along the west coast. By Friday, January 3rd, we see scattered snow showers across the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast, though nothing particularly significant. The most notable storm will be in the northwest, bringing snowfall to the Cascades, Sierra Nevada, and northern Rockies, with rain in lower elevation areas. On Saturday, January 4th, a low-pressure system begins to develop near New Mexico and Colorado. This storm is expected to travel straight across the country. The exact storm track remains uncertain, with models showing both northern and southern solutions. The storm's path will heavily depend on the depth and intensity of the cold air. A deeper cold air mass would pull the jet stream and storm track farther south, while milder conditions would allow for a more northern trajectory. By Sunday, January 5th, snowfall spreads across Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky. Ice accumulation is possible in Missouri, Kentucky, and Tennessee, creating the potential for a freezing rain event. Thunderstorms may also develop in Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, Alabama, and southern Tennessee, regions that have recently experienced severe weather. Moving to Monday, January 6th, freezing rain becomes more widespread, affecting areas like Kentucky, West Virginia, and northern North Carolina, particularly in mountainous regions. Snowfall continues in Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, West Virginia, and parts of northern Virginia. By Tuesday, January 7th, and Wednesday, January 8th, colder air plunges into the eastern United States, setting the stage for the next potential storm. Around January 9th, models suggest a low-pressure system forming off the Texas coast. Earlier runs indicated this storm hugging the coast and producing significant snowfall, with blizzard conditions possible along parts of the East Coast. However, recent models have trended toward a more suppressed storm track farther south. This scenario would limit snowfall to states like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and possibly parts of Texas, Louisiana, and New Mexico. The suppressed storm track, common in GFS models, is something to watch. This model tends to place storms too far south in the long range, but this is not always the case. If the storm stays closer to the coast, it could threaten areas farther north with significant snowfall. By Friday afternoon, January 10th, the low-pressure system could intensify near Savannah, Georgia, with heavy snowfall affecting Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. If this scenario plays out, it would be a historic event for the region. As such, intense snowfall paired with extreme cold is highly unusual. In the very deep south, a storm that comes to mind is one from around 1980. I recall a massive snowstorm impacting areas like southern North Carolina and South Carolina. However, it didn't stretch into Alabama the way this current one is projected to. That 1980 storm stands out as an intense snowstorm for the deep south. The issue with the current system is how it climbs up the coast, giving the appearance of becoming a major event, only to flatten out and shift offshore. For a more expansive snowstorm, we'd need a system that follows a more northern trajectory. Right now, it's a bit of a fork in the road. We're seeing a massive system for South Carolina and North Carolina, but it doesn't reach Virginia or farther north. It just continues offshore. Meanwhile, we have a low-pressure system forming over the Dakotas, bringing snowfall to areas in the northern plains and upper Midwest. Moving forward around the 11th, there's a slight warming in the east before cooling down again. By the 12th, another potential coastal snowstorm begins to emerge. We'll explore this further with the next model run, which shows additional developments related to this second storm system. Around the 15th, activity begins developing near the Gulf of Mexico, resembling tropical systems. This unusual jet stream structure could lead to a southern slider pattern, but at 336 hours out, these predictions could change significantly. If this system moves into the trough, it might bring ice and snow inland. Unfortunately, the current model run ends on the 17th, leaving us with questions about its evolution. Now looking at the 18Z run, we're focusing on two storms. Storm number 1 was previously modeled near the Gulf Coast, but now appears closer to the Bahamas, delivering light snowfall to the Carolinas. This shift demonstrates how model runs can vary, with a 6-hour difference leading to a 100 to 200 mile shift in the low-pressure center. Around the 14th originates from a different region, supported by a new batch of cold air moving into the US. This system shows potential for East Coast impacts due to a favorable jet stream. However, this is far out, and fluctuations in the models are expected with each update. The low-pressure center for this storm threatens Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia, focusing on a southeast snowstorm scenario. While long-range patterns suggest some support for coastal storms, snowfall in the mid-Atlantic and southern New England might be limited. Turning to the European model for storm number 1, we see a northern trajectory impacting states like Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey. The west remains consistent in snowfall, but the coastal development around the 10th aligns with a flat jet stream over the south. Cold air deepens but remains slightly offshore, leaving the potential for snowfall highly sensitive to minor shifts in the low-pressure system. The European model hints at a second system around the 14th, 15th, but suggests diminishing cold air as the storm progresses. This reduces the likelihood of significant snowfall compared to earlier projections. As for total precipitation, the European model highlights the northwest and deep south as the most active areas due to these storm systems, with relatively dry conditions elsewhere. Precipitation anomalies show below-average levels across most of the United States, which aligns with National Weather Service forecasts. Based on the overall pattern we're seeing, here's the total snowfall forecast from the European model. The Mountain West does well, especially in the northern Cascades and the Rockies. However, the Sierra Nevada and southern Cascades are more marginal, with snowfall totals of about a foot, which is on the lower end for those areas. The initial snow system is set to bring significant snowfall to Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, Maryland, D.C., Delaware, and Pennsylvania. Many of these areas could see close to 10 inches of snow, which is far from a typical clipper system. Instead, it's shaping up to be an intense snowstorm. Looking at some amounts on the model, certain areas could see 15-20 inches, though I think totals will likely be closer to 10 inches overall. Using the positive snow depth change map, which reflects actual accumulation, most areas are in the 6-10 inch range, with purples indicating 6-10 inches and pinks showing 10+ inches. I like using this map closer to the event because it accounts for factors like ground temperatures and gives a clearer picture of realistic accumulations. However, in the long range, it's less reliable due to the butterfly effect, as small changes in the model can lead to significant differences. Switching to the GFS model's total snowfall, we see potential accumulation in the deeper south, including Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. This system also brings lighter snowfall along the eastern seaboard. In the Midwest and Ohio Valley, snowfall totals will likely be around 6-10 inches, with isolated spots seeing up to a foot. For the deep south, accumulation could be trickier due to warmer ground temperatures before the snowfall. Louisiana and Mississippi, for instance, might struggle with consistent accumulation, but the potential for a historic snow event remains. Historically, models tend to shift snowfall forecasts northward as we approach the event. A further southward shift seems unlikely since it would result in snow along the Gulf Coast, a highly improbable scenario. Still, anything is possible, so it's important to stay cautious. The 18Z model doesn't show the same snow system, but gives a similar result in terms of snowfall placement, with lighter amounts in some western areas, but still significant totals for the Carolinas. For the east, the 10 to 15 inch range forecasted for the Carolinas will likely be closer to 6-10 inches in reality. The initial snow system, especially in the middle regions, still has the potential to shift southward, which could bring snowfall to new areas. However, with the clock ticking, southern shifts become less likely as the event nears. Looking at temperature anomalies, we're still slightly warmer than average. And guys, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel and comment. See you in the next video.